I don't know how it changes things when we go live. It just says live, and I see a 0506. But we'll give folks a few minutes. And I don't know how we see, to be honest, even though I know we're live right now, I don't know how we see when we have people that are coming in. I don't know how that works, but I guess we'll just hang out and see how that works.
All right.
So we'll give it a few minutes. And,
Sure.
so I will also shut down my various email windows. Do that. Studio. Why I'm getting some kind of pop-up here. It's pretty funny. Oh, well, not able to do it. It's okay. I'm not going to be broadcasting my email anyway. I just have no idea. And like I say, we'll get started in about 2 minutes, whether or not we see anybody in here or not, and we'll go through the content. I was just expecting to see some sort of indication that people are joining in or not. But this is one of those things where we. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if they just show up on the sidebar over there.
Yeah, so we have Vikas is in. Okay, so it does show up in the, but it shows up in the chat there. It looks like I have to change it. It's for some reason I have two boxes. I have a YouTube box and I have another box, looks like for LinkedIn. But good morning, Vikas. Where are you from, Vikas? Hi, Benjamin. Looks like he's in from LinkedIn. Okay, so I see, and so folks, I'm just getting used to this new platform, so I apologize for the slight delay in getting started, but it looks like when people come in, it has an icon in the bottom, should we know in the chat, whether it's from LinkedIn or from YouTube. Good morning, Amit. How are you? Hi, Vikas. You're coming in from NVIDIA. Where is NVIDIA located? They're in California, are they? Vikas? Morelli, how are you? We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Just give folks a few minutes to join. This is our first one with this, my first StreamYard usage. So just a bit of a learning curve here for us this morning. But we'll give it like maybe one more minute, and we're going to go through our planned agenda. Vikas from India. Nice. Which part of India, Vikas, are you from? Some work with some companies right now in India. I've been to see, I've experienced Pune firsthand myself about 3 years ago. I had the pleasure of spending about a week there. It was quite fun. Okay, you're in Pune, which is great.
Oh, cool.
Right.
Yeah, my wife.
Yeah, so my wife. Oh yeah, cool. Very cool. Yeah, it was quite an experience over there. What I learned from that experience is no respect for the line, and when you're driving, that's the one thing I took away. There's no respect for the line. Okay, so yeah, organized chaos for sure. So let's get going. So here's the idea for today and this next 3 parts. So I'm trying to bring forward a format that I used to use when I was with SAP. And I did this SAP Cloud Platform Garage for about 3 years, where it's always a pair of people, where I get the chance to ask some people that are way smarter than me a bunch of questions and then share that information with you. So in that particular case today, let's do some quick introductions. Ush, what do you do for Solace?
So, hey Scott, hey everyone. I'm Ush Shukla. I'm a distinguished engineer at Solace. And so what that means from a day-to-day perspective is I help enterprises, I help folks in general see the value that Solace and event-driven architecture can provide to their enterprise and to their day-to-day, right? How it can enhance it. And experience-wise, I've been doing this for a very long time now, about I think coming on 20 years, although I don't feel that old. I've been everywhere from Red Hat to TIBCO to I started off as a web developer back when you had to do HTML and JavaScript by hand without frameworks. So gives you an idea.
Awesome. And so this is Scott Dillon. I joined Solace about a year ago. I came to Solace from SAP, where I was doing a lot of BTP work. And so here's the quick story. So the story is the following. 6 months ago, or maybe 8 months ago now, there is a new service that sits on top of the Business Technology Platform, referred to as the SAP Integration Suite Advanced Event Mesh. So for SAP customers specifically that are looking to take advantage of Business Technology Platform and build event-driven applications, there's now a service, an enterprise class service in the bundle inside of BTP that you can use to do that. And so the goal is, over these next 3 sessions, to give you a very gentle introduction to what that service is, how it can be used, how it can be used with S4. But what I've seen over the past year, working with really insightful people like Ush, is that sometimes there needs to be this foundational discussion around some of the core concepts that are needed to be understood when you start talking about event-driven architecture. So today, the idea is, and in honor of, or just a shout out to Dave Letterman, who had his top 10 list. I have a top 12 plus a bonus question for Ush that we're going to go through. And the idea is today we're going to set a foundation. Sometimes I say coat the brush for some topics, and then 2 weeks from now, same time, same bat channel, we will do another session and we'll go a little bit deeper. And in the session after that, we'll go a little bit deeper. So if we get a lot of interest and stuff like that, then we'll continue to do other sessions in the future. But these first 3 are really meant so that when you get to the end of the 3rd session, you would have a grounding on some of the basics of event-driven architecture. Because what I know now, after 12 months, there's quite a few things you need to be aware of when you're starting to think about event-driven, how it provides you a flexibility, how your applications and services can be loosely coupled, and how, more importantly, can be used with SAP applications, either functional applications like ECC, ERP, SuccessFactors, and how it can be used with the technical services. So a common question we get, for example, is how do I use Advanced Event Mesh with Integration Suite? How can I build iFlows that are event enabled? So things like that. So without further ado, Mr. Shukla, are you ready?
I am ready.
So I have the magic card list here. So the first question, which should come as no surprise to anybody here, the question is, what is event-driven architecture?
Awesome. Great question. So event-driven architecture, often folks, you'll hear it used informally as EDA or referred to informally as EDA, is really a different way of thinking about how your enterprise or whatever you happen to be developing at or on, how your applications interact, how the different entities in your enterprise interact. Really going from more of everybody has to know where everybody is, being able to call particular services, if you will, and really ask for information, moving more towards I'm broadcasting information, you are welcome to listen to it and act on it if you want.
Right. And so this is funny because when I meet with a lot of people and we talk about this on the SAP side, sometimes people they net it down to, so let me get this straight. Really what you're saying is we can push things out of SAP in real time should we wish to do it. And they kind of summarize everything about event-driven architecture. And I guess that's one aspect of it, right? Where you can push things out. You don't have to ask for it. You're being pushed information your way.
Sure, exactly.
All right, well then that's good for event-driven architecture. We'll just leave it there, but we're going to come back to it, of course. So the next question is, pretty simply, what is an event?
Event. So it makes sense, right? You're talking about event-driven architecture here. What actually are you architecting when you say events and event-driven? So in a very abstract sense, general sense, an event is really anything that happens, right? If I get super abstract, a light changing at an intersection is really an event, something that prompts a change in state. Like I'm going from stopping to driving or driving to stopping. If I bring it back to the enterprise, it's a change in information, a change in data, a change in something in the enterprise that may be of interest to others or may not be. Say, for example, I have employee onboarding. A new employee joins. The fact that they joined is an event. I have an ordering system, order management. An order got fulfilled, an order got picked up. That's an event. An order got paid. That's an event.
Gotcha. So sometimes when we're meeting with with a lot of these SAP customers, because they haven't been thinking through event-driven architecture. They're like, okay, so help me understand this from an SAP perspective. What would be an SAP event? And my generic response often is, well, number one, let's think of a sales order created event, right? So the idea is when somebody would go into SAP and they would create a sales order or they would modify a sales order. And a really popular example of that is that if somebody was changing the delivery date on a sales order, which, as you can imagine, as a customer, you might be interested to know that your brand new pair of shoes had a delayed 2 weeks. So if you had a sales order change event, you could then push that out in real time and then have people be made aware of that, right? As a push mechanism. Is that correct? That could be an event, the sales order change event.
Absolutely. It's something that's triggering something else, right? Or something that triggers something to happen.
Right, exactly. So something is being triggered, and then Vikas is asking a question here. He's like, okay, SAP has its own BTP framework to handle events. Why Solace and EM? We're going to get to that a little bit later, but I want you to think about just one thing, Vikas, before we get to the end. When we're publishing an event out of something like ECC or S4, now it's going to be available outside the four walls of your S4 system, because you're 100% right. SAP has had eventing inside of S4 for a long time, but now we want to make sure those events are available externally, which is what we'll get into today. So this is the idea behind event-driven architecture. And of course, I didn't put up again, this is a bit of a learning curve for me. So I didn't have that banner up there to say, what is an event? So that is number two. So the summary is anything in SAP can be an event. So changing a purchase order, creating a purchase order, creating a work order, pretty much anything. And also the other little tidbit there is SAP themselves are now publishing and making available events inside of S4 out of the box. So they're slowly trending down this path with some events and more events to come in the next release of S4. So this is good. So Bush, number 3, what is a topic?
Awesome. Oh, and you changed it this time. Nice. Okay, good. So events, event-driven architecture, awesome. And topics are really fundamental or foundational to this whole idea of eventing and event-driven, right? And if I borrow the terminology or the analogy of a post office, a topic is really an address. So when you and I are corresponding with letters, as we often do, when I am sending you a letter, I'm not running the letter over to you, and you're not sitting there asking me to write your letter. Maybe you are, I don't know. But in my case, I'm not running over with the letter, handing it to you over there in Ottawa, and then running back home. I simply address it to you. And then somehow magically, through the magic of the post office or the postal system, that address is directed towards you, and you are, in a manner of speaking, listening on that address. You're checking your mailbox every so often, and then eventually you get the letter. And so in that way, a topic is really an address on which I send events for
Gotcha.
whoever is interested.
100%. So we have an envelope. We put some content into it. we put the address, the topic on the envelope, and we send it. And now I guess one of the things that's really important for me in my learning curve over the past year is now people on the other side, these BTP applications, like Integration Suite is one example, could raise its hand and say, yeah, I'd like to have the envelopes that were sent with the following address. And they can just pick it up, right? They don't have to go directly back to the person that published it. They're going to the mail system and saying, hey, give me all the envelopes that are coming in with this address, and you pick them all up, which I think is a pretty powerful. That's amazing. Thank you. Let's go back, getting the hang of this new tool. So number 4, what is PubSub?
Cool. Now we're getting into the technology, which is awesome.
A little bit.
A little bit at a time. That's how it works, right? Baby steps.
Yep.
So PubSub, again, building on this foundation of EDA, core concept of EDA, right? Is we're talking about topics here. We're talking about sending, and we're like mailing the letter, receiving the letter, sending the event, receiving the event. That act of sending and receiving is really what we're doing over there, is publishing an event on a given topic and subscribing to that event from that topic. So when I'm publishing it, I'm doing pub, publisher, publishing. And then when I'm receiving it, I'm really subscribing. So subscriber. And so you get PubSub, which is a pattern of sending information across your enterprise for consumption, right?
Right, gotcha. So because a question that I get sometimes is, well, when you publish something, where does it go? But let's just go back for a second. So let's put it in context of S4. So, or ECC, S4 success factors. We've got customers doing event-driven with all 3 of these at the moment. And so let's say I go back to this business partner object inside of SAP. Sure. A business partner, for people that are on the phone that are familiar with, or people that are online that are familiar with business partner, it's basically a customer or a vendor. And a topic might be something like, if I were to describe it, it might be business partner / customer ID / city / email address / whatever. So you can have this topic, this address that you refer to. It can be whatever you want. And then I publish with that address. So every single time a business partner is being created, now I'm saying here, I'm publishing this. It's out there. It's kind of on the radio network. It's out there for the world to be then to subscribe to. And it's been labeled with this topic. And the question that we get from customers is, well, how do I determine what that topic is, and is a topic predefined? So when someone is publishing something from S4, they have the choice, and they can specify whatever topic they want, which is, I think, a good thing. So on the publishing side, that's clear. And then let's talk about the consumer side for a second. So on the subscription side, if we think about some of the services that are used in BTP, one of the big questions that's always asked by customers is, well, how do this strategic advice that SAP gives us about keeping the core clean, could I use PubSub to do that? And the answer is absolutely, because you would have services now that are subscribing to events coming out of S4. So as an example, in the integration space, if you were a customer using Integration Suite, if I understand probably what you've said so far, I could subscribe to a new business partner event. So the service on BTP could raise its hand and say, give me all business partners that are in the Montreal area. And all of a sudden, this microservice, this iFlow on BTP, would receive all business partner events. Is that kind of like the idea behind this PubSub?
Absolutely. And the cool thing there is you don't need to know where which system is actually publishing those or sending out, if you will, those business partner events, right? And going back to the idea of EDA being a change in thinking, it's not about querying somewhere periodically for that information. It's more about waiting and really that information is delivered to you without you having to explicitly go out and say, give it to me.
Right. And the other big thing that I personally I want to say I'm in love with it, but this whole idea behind Pub Sub is that is kind of weird. But the whole idea behind Pub Sub is that yes, I can have integration suite subscribing to a new business partner, but then without any change, I could have a workflow also subscribing to new business partners, and I can have a mobile application subscribing to that. And in all three cases, I'm subscribing to the event. I'm not going back to S4 to ask for that new business partner again. I just subscribe to the message. So it completely isolates me or loosely couples me from S4, right? And then I got one-to-many going on in that particular case.
Yeah, absolutely. And you use a very instrumental term there, which is loosely coupling. It really helps. Divorce is perhaps the wrong word, but that's the only word I can think of right now. The source from the destination. And it gets into this idea of being able to scale out my subscribers or the folks that care about that information independent of who's actually sending that information. Because oftentimes with
Gotcha.
older architectures, or the way we think about it, typically synchronously, as we say, you really have to worry about resource consumption on the sender side, right? If you're looking at the system that has the information, if you are tightly coupling everybody, which is the opposite of loosely coupling, you really have to worry about, am I consuming too many resources on the sender side by tightly coupling and scaling all these consumers. With a loosely coupled architecture, you have a lot more in terms of scale because you're not taxing the originating system.
Right. Totally get that. No, lots of advantages there. Okay, that's good on. Well, it's a good introductory explanation of pub sub, publish, subscribe, one-to-many. That's the idea. Subscribing based on a topic name, which is pretty interesting. So then number, I don't know what number we're on, maybe number 4 or 5, lost count. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Next one. What is a queue?
Okay, awesome question. So we've been talking about PubSub, we've been talking about topics. At least in the context we're talking about here, topics are really ephemeral, right? And so what does that word mean that was just used? They don't really have anything in the way of persistence attached to them, not in the context we're using it here. Arguably, different platforms may do it differently. Different folks may say there is persistence attached. In this case, there isn't. So if there's no persistence for a given topic, what do I do if I as a subscriber, again, the entity receiving that message, what do I do if I am not there to receive the message? Well, tough luck, right? I'm not going to get it. You lost that message.
Right.
You missed that message.
Mm-hmm.
And so queuing is this idea that I can attach persistence to my pub sub. And so I can save off those messages. And even if I'm not there to receive them, when I do come back and I am available to receive them, I can just pick them up and continue processing.
Right.
If we borrow the post office analogy again, it's my mailbox. It's not as if I'm standing outside the door, the USPS van drives by, or the Canada Post van drives by and throws the letters at me, and if I'm not there to catch them, I lose my letters. That would kind of suck as a customer experience. I have my mailbox here, right, which is like for me down the street. So they just put the guy stops by, puts the letters in the mailbox, so they're safe there for me until I go get them. So same idea. That's the queue
Right.
in an eventing perspective.
Gotcha. That's a really good analogy. And people that know me know I love analogies, and I always think of it similarly with the use of a PVR. So when I'm sitting down to watch my, 1 or 2 TV shows every second or third night, if I haven't had a chance to, tune in when the program was initially scheduled, I have a program set up, it dumps it onto the queue, onto the PVR storage, and I kind of start it up and I watch it. So same kind of idea. Is it true? Is it a true statement that the way that I should think of a queue, it's almost like a subscriber, because the way you get information into the queue is by subscribing to a topic? Is that also true?
Absolutely, that can be true. That is also true.
Okay.
And I wouldn't think that's necessarily the wrong way of thinking about it, provided you keep in mind that the queue isn't doing anything to the messages. It's just saving them off.
Right.
And in that way,
Right.
it's subscribing to that topic to save off messages.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I just want to pause here because we have a question, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. So, good question from Lester, or good comment. You may need to follow on. You may need a follow-on API call to get additional data about the event. So, just pause here. So, he's 100% right. So, in the conversations that we're having with SAP customers, the default pattern by SAP, which is changing, just as an FYI, going into the next year. But every event that SAP has published for S4 up until I think today are what we refer to as notification events. So in the example that I gave earlier, if a business partner changed, the current eventing mechanism from SAP for the out-of-the-box events, not to be confused with the ones that we can configure ourselves, it would say, oh, a new business partner record has changed. Here's the ID, 1234. That notification event would land on top of BTP, and you'd have a service over there that would say, oh, great, I'm interested in that change. What's going on? And basically you would have a callback, back into S4 or ECC to get the payload for that, for the full data event. Now, Lester, just to talk to you specifically, I get, it's 50-50. When we walk into a customer and we talk about the notification events, either 50% of the people say, awesome, no problem, understand the paradigm, call back, in my wheelhouse, we'll do it. The other 50% say, well, hold on a second, Scott. The whole point behind event-driven architecture is to be loosely coupled. I get the event, and this whole idea that producers don't know about consumers and consumers don't know about producers, aren't you breaking that kind of paradigm? I'm like, yep. But the good news is we support both. And what we're seeing now is SAP starting to trend towards having a framework with the new RAP-based ABAP framework in the next release of S4, that you can create these data events. And also with some of the custom plugins that are out there today via Sapio, you can create full-blown data events. So the customer will choose which one they want to do. There's no right or wrong. It just depends on the circumstance. But that's a really good point, Lester. Okay, so let me go back to my questions here. Thank God I have the cards and they're in order, Ush. So that was good. That was a good discussion around what a queue can be used for. So, and this is directly related. So sometimes customers will say to me, so hold on a second. So you're publishing the message, but where does it go? And so let's have a conversation around what is an event broker.
Cool. Right. So before you teed that up, I would have just said it went into the ether and it somehow magically gets to you. Harry Potter style, but now I can't do that anymore. Right. So the event. So we've been talking about pub subs. Somehow we've sort of glossed over that. Somehow the messages were getting to the subscribers, and that somehow is actually this thing called an event broker, which is a piece of technology which, much like your post office with letters, sits in the middle and says, okay, you are publishing, and I'm going to make sure that I take your message and get it to the subscribers wherever they may be. And it's that piece of technology that sits in the middle and really facilitates this loose coupling to allow for you to allow the publishers and the subscribers really not to know about each other, while still being able to get the messages where they need to go.
Gotcha. So some of the comments I hear sometimes, Ush, or some of the analogies, like the broker acts as the traffic cop. Like it's keeping an eye on all the messages coming in, and it's the one that is determining, based on some secret sauce, inside the broker, where these messages should be going as a next step, right, or a next destination. Is that a fair analogy?
It is. I prefer the post office analogy because of the whole idea of addressing. The traffic cop is really just there to make sure that you don't enter the intersection and slam into somebody. You're not supposed to. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could use that one too.
Awesome. All right, so let's go on to the next one, because this next one, is my favorite. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Gotta go back. Gotta go back to my banners here. I'm still getting used to the tool. What is an event mesh? And before you answer, this is an important one because on the when people log into the Business Technology Platform and they look at the Discovery Center, they're going to see some services, and one of them is called the SAP Integration Suite Advanced Event Mesh. So we're going to show that towards the end of the call today. But let's just talk about what is an event mesh in general.
Okay, sounds good. So we know what events are.
Yep.
Hopefully, folks have heard of this idea of a mesh, things connected together, all interconnected. But again, I'm going to go back to my favorite post office analogy. So I want folks to think for a second about there being one massive global post office, right? It's situated somewhere in the middle of, I don't know, the Atlantic. Yeah, sure, why not? Somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, your letter goes there, and there's a bunch of people in that super massive post office who are trying to make sure letters get everywhere, right? Whether it's North America, whether it's Europe, somewhere in some city in Europe or some person in Europe, rather, they would get overwhelmed very, very quickly, right? We would have a lot of literally crazy people in the post office. A lot of people going.
Overwhelmed.
Yes, exactly. Overwhelmed. Why not? So rather than that, I think the post offices globally, as they are set up today, makes more sense, right? Where if I'm sending a letter to India, for example, I don't need to know how the messages are going to get routed in India to that particular address. All I really need to know is I'm going to send it out. My post office will take that letter and send it to a post office in India and let them worry about how to route it to its eventual destination. And so if I take that idea and I bring it back to the event brokers, if I interconnect all these event brokers into a mesh, so you have all these individual event brokers all interconnected, then if I need to get a message somewhere outside of my broker, I only need to worry about sending it to my broker. My broker, having talked to the other brokers, then does the heavy lifting for me, right? And figures out, okay, this is your closest broker over here. So I'm just going to send it there, the closest broker to your subscriber. So I'm going to send it there. And then that broker on the far side can worry about getting it to the exact destination.
Right. So if I were to use your analogy and overlay it with applications. So in the small town where I am, you're 100% right. We have a small local post office that deals with the 4,000 people that live in the small city that I live in. So essentially, if all the houses that are in where I live and just outside of Ottawa, if all those houses became little applications and the post office became our local broker, then all the houses are dealt locally with that broker. All the applications that are local to that broker get serviced there. And then that broker, which is a local post office, gets connected to another broker, maybe in the neighboring city, and they take care of that city. So if there's one thing that people remember from this session today, I'm of the opinion, personally, after being here now 14 months, that the most important concept you can remember about this advanced event mesh, it is distributed by design. So the idea is you place these small brokers next to the applications that it will serve. The idea is not to have one centralized big broker where all applications from all over the world are hooking into it. You put a broker next to, as an example, S4. You put another broker next to the applications you're building on AWS. You put another broker, a small one, next to GCP and the applications you build there. And then these multiple brokers would join and they would form a mesh. So when you go into BTP and you see Integration Suite, Advanced Event Mesh, this is what you're getting access to, which we will show you in a few minutes. But the idea is to build out a mesh, a series of smaller brokers connected together, servicing applications locally. I hope that resonates. So if there's one thing you take away, definitely take away that one. Okay, on to the next one. EDA. So what I hear a lot, Bush, is that when you adopt and you start thinking about EDA, customers should be able to achieve some increased agility and flexibility when they're building these applications. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, 110%. And that's one of the reasons I love and champion EDA as a architectural pattern, right? A way of thinking about your enterprise applications and the data that they're exchanging and the information that they're exchanging. So perfect example. I'll take this example from two ends. Okay. Making ice cream, which is something that we do today, or an EDA example we do today. Everybody loves ice cream, but everybody doesn't love ice cream if it makes you sick. Now, and to make sure you don't get sick from ice cream, these companies that are making it have quality control going on, right? They have QC to make sure that batches are safe for consumption, that nothing bad ended up in a batch and you ship that batch out. You don't want to ship that batch out. Now, in an EDA world, which we have today with this particular use case, as the ice cream is being made and packaged and whatnot, samples are being sent to the QC lab, right? And the minute, if and when there's a problem discovered with the batch, the QC lab just fires off an event to the assembly line directly to say, stop this batch or prevent this batch from being shipped. So that one event, and we can already begin to see the agility and the flexibility here. The minute a discrepancy is detected, shipping is notified, production line is notified, anything in the supply chain where that batch may have gone is notified to say, take this batch out of production immediately. Make sure it doesn't get too far. And we can then we can react and figure out what's wrong in almost near real time, right? Now, imagine I didn't have this EDA paradigm. The other option, if you can even think about it that way, is to have somebody on the assembly line asking the QC folks, has something gone wrong with this batch? Or an app asking the QC app, has something gone wrong with this batch? So they have to keep asking. In the meantime, stuff is already going on the production line. It's maybe already shipped. It's maybe already on a truck. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, of all the no's that were coming back, all of a sudden a yes has come back. That, you know what? Yeah, this batch that you just sent out actually has something wrong with it. Listeria, I know, something else. Now you have to worry about, okay, am I going to somehow poll or notify that one? Well, I can't notify because I'm not using event-driven architecture. So I have to hope that that truck or that packaging center has queried at the same time as me and figured out that before that batch shipped, before it's actually loaded onto the truck, there's something wrong with it. Suppose they didn't. That thing has just left the loading dock and is now headed towards potentially a customer, which really upends everything, right? Because now I've potentially negatively impacted my customers.
No, that's a really good example. I'll give you. I'll just share my thoughts on one other example, and I really enjoyed the CTO of Amazon kind of walking people through this at AWS reInvent, because he said, one of the things that event-driven architecture does, in addition to the scenario that you just highlighted, he says it lets us expand and deliver more comprehensive services over time with zero impact. So he was giving the example of, publishing or building a service. And so you're publishing events, and maybe the event, to your point, could be one related to quality control, or maybe it's an order created. So if you're creating an order, and now I have one application on BTP or one service that takes that order information and maybe it puts it on to a dashboard, as an example. But then someone says, really simple example, but someone says, well, why can't we send the customer maybe an instant message or an email or some sort of notification if the order status has changed? So you can complement and evolve that service over time with no disruption to the existing service. So you can keep making that service more and more comprehensive with zero downtime. And the reverse is also true. You can take pieces out of your IT infrastructure without affecting anybody else, which means the testing is a shorter time cycle because it's a smaller service. The impact on the other services that don't have to be tested is impacted. So I think there's a lot of things that we don't have time to unpack today, but when people start going down this path, they see huge benefit on the agility and flexibility point. Okay, slowly running out of time here, so let's go on to the next one.
Let's talk about it.
I know there's a lot to talk about, and we're just touching the surface, we're scratching the surface here. So let's just touch briefly on distributed benefits. So this goes back to the mesh concept. So separate and distinct from EDA, when people start moving down this road of having a mesh, what do you see customers realizing when they start to have their first mesh with 2 or 3 brokers? What do you see there as being one of the number one benefits that gets surfaced out of that?
Number one benefits is just reach, right? Being able to get my data somewhere far away very quickly.
Right.
That tends to start blowing people's minds at the outset with the mesh. Is, we're working like the furniture company out there, order very popular but massive order management problem, right? Because you would check online, they'd be like, yeah, we have this thing in stock. You drive to the store, which for me is a 30-minute drive, and they're like, yeah, sorry, sold out. Like,
right.
Damn it, I just drove 30 minutes for nothing. So I eat at the restaurant, then I leave. But now with this mesh, right, they're able to socialize from the warehouse to the stores much better. Like when I say socialize, I mean these events, right? Able to send it out much quicker, much better, much faster. So the stores have a more real-time view of what's actually in stock. And then that bleeds over into the online portal as well, because now the online portal has a real view of what's happening.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily need to drive to the store, or before I do, maybe they updated me and say, you know what, you were looking for this thing. And they send me a notification to their app on my phone saying you were looking for this thing online. Well, in between when you looked at it and you put your jeans on, it's sold out. Sorry, bud. Come back next week, kind of thing, right?
Gotcha. That's a good one for sure. And I'll just share another one because some of these customers that we're dealing with, one of the things that they've indicated to us is that when we start thinking about master data distribution out of an SAP system, it's very common that customers would have multiple applications sitting on GCP or AWS, whatever the case may be. These applications are sitting out there in the cloud. And let's say we had 5 applications. All 5 applications are reaching into SAP asking, is there a master data change? Is there a master data change? So that's 5 connections from the cloud, reaching across into their on-prem system, pulling the master data out. And when we architect for them and show them, look, you put one little broker on-prem, one broker in AWS as an example, if that's their environment, well, now you have one connection to start with. So one connection, better than 5. And then you have one message that traverses the network, which is encrypted and compressed and encrypted. So now we have one message traversing the network. And then again, that local broker, that local post office is servicing all 5 of those applications. So the benefits become pretty apparent pretty quick. Okay, so on to the next one. Another popular question.
Hit me.
What is a topic taxonomy? Big question with customers.
Yeah, awesome question too, because it's really cool. So we've been talking about topics, we've been talking about addresses. So again, let's go back to the post office. If I just slapped an arbitrary set of letters on us and said that was an address for Scott and tried to send it to you, there's a very small likelihood that you'd actually get the letter, right? I actually need to address it to you where you live. And so that's a particular name of a street, a particular country, a particular province or state or principality. And that's really what a topic taxonomy is. It's this best practice of laying out your topic string and what your topic string actually says so that you can take maximal advantage of the mesh. Because once you lay it out properly, then on the publisher side, once you're publishing on a proper taxonomy, on the subscriber side, you can actually start using that taxonomy to filter out stuff you don't want and filter in, I guess you could say it that way. I don't know. Use or filter for the stuff you do want.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I think what I've heard from you many times over the past year and from our services team is that developing this topic taxonomy, when you're getting started, it's very easy because with the advanced event mesh, people can publish dynamic topics. In other words, there's no need to predefine what the topic is. So the good news is you can publish anything. The bad news is you can publish anything. So when people start thinking about, a topic taxonomy, they're like, it's kind of like what data modeling was for the database world. It's kind of like that for topics where you need to start thinking about, okay, on the SAP side, I've got purchase orders, sales orders, work orders, like all these different objects. What's a structure that makes sense? So when you start publishing events, people have an idea, and normally like it's noun, verb, a version number, and then a list of attributes. They have an idea of what they can get access to. So it becomes really, really important, I think. Okay, so let's move on. And of course, we have a portal where all that gets defined. But let's move on to the next one. Next one. This is the big one. So what is observability? Like I hear this term all the time. Wish like you read a couple of blogs here and there, just try to be smart on this stuff. And people are talking about observability in the context of event-driven architecture. Why is that so important?
So in a nutshell, event-driven architecture is cool, as hopefully we've shown up till now. But one of the challenges is that this idea of being able to see what's going on with that event-driven architecture, right? When I'm not doing event-driven, when I'm doing typical synchronous type architectures, it's easier, if you will, to see what's going on because I know exactly who I'm talking with.
Right.
As a publisher or as somebody providing data, I'm connected to that system directly, right? I'm giving them data. Or the flip side, for me consuming data, I'm pulling from a system, pulling from a database, I'm pulling from SAP. Whatever the case may be. You lose that tight coupling in EDA intentionally because you favor loose coupling. But then in order to be able to track everything is where observability fits in and observability tooling fits in. So like the root word says observe, I still want to be able to see what my events are doing, where they're going, who's consuming them, who's rejecting them, who's enriching them. And so that's really observability, this idea that I want to have visibility into those events and where they're going and where they may be coming from and going to.
Okay, I got you. That's good. And I just leave it like that. I'll leave it like that for now because there's so much more to say there, but we'll get into that in a future session. So next, this is a big one, probably pretty important. What is BTP and AEM? So Business Technology Platform, Advanced Event Mesh. How does it relate to everything we've been talking about so far today?
Cool. So AEM is the service, the SAP service that actually provides everything we've talked about, right? With regards to topics, events, topic taxonomy, all that exciting stuff.
Okay, very, very cool. So that's enough to say about that because we're going to show it in the next 2 minutes or so. Let's see how much time we got left here. Maybe about 10 minutes. Cool. Last but not least, on the question side, the question is, sorry, it's kind of, the camera kind of picks it up from time to time, AEM plus S4. So in general, what I hear a lot in these customer conversations is, can I use the advanced event mesh to event enable ECC and S4? So a customer that's either already on S4 or en route to S4, this magical service called the advanced event mesh, can I start to make my S4 system an active participant today with the advanced event mesh? That's the question.
Absolutely. Why not, right? With those notifications coming out of the S4 system, notifications with data, potentially data changes, 100%.
Cool. I love that answer. That is the right answer. So let me,
get a prize?
Yeah, no, this is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I love it. So let me now, again, I'm just getting used to the screen here. Before I move over, so for folks that are online, not on the phone, but online participating today, number one, thank you. Before I just transition over to a really quick demo, are there any questions that you may have as I move over? I'll just pause for 20, 30 seconds. And I will click, I think it's here. So obviously not obviously, but some of the questions that we get often are, okay, so what does it look like? So maybe we can do a really brief overview of the platform. Let's take 5 or 6 minutes to do that. So what I've done in advance of, let me just refresh this screen if I may. Hold on. Trying to hit the right refresh button. Just make sure we're okay there. And so here we have, so when a customer goes in, so number one, when a customer goes into, hold on, let me get rid of that banner that's showing up there. Let's get rid of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's go back here. Let's maximize it so there's no banner in the way. So first question from a customer is, how do I get access to it? So the first answer to that is easy. If a customer has a cloud platform enterprise agreement from SAP, they can go in and they can activate the service. And the service, at the moment, you basically pick the size of broker that you want. You pick the location where the broker will run, and you will set up a broker. And as soon as you stand it up, no matter where you stand it up, it will consume some of your CPA credits. And I make that last comment because the service, once it's activated, you can deploy brokers virtually anywhere. Now, we're not going to dig into details today on the model, but just assume for this conversation that you can, in fact, deploy brokers even in places where BTP is not available. And the example that I always use, let's say, for example, you wanted to get access to this service on Azure on BTP in Canada. Well, unfortunately, at the moment, BTP doesn't run on Azure in Canada, but you could still activate a broker running on Azure in Canada through the BTP Advanced Event Mesh. So let's start with a quick overview here. Bush, what am I looking at on this screen, my friend? What am I looking at here?
Awesome. So you're looking at the 3 main pillars of event-driven in the context of AEM, right? The first off, we have event management. So that's this idea that I want to be able to effectively design my event-driven architecture, right? I just want to throw stuff out there and hope that it works. Like a good architect, I want to be able to architect it. And so that's where the designer comes in. It lets me build my event-driven architectures, decide on the topic taxonomies that we just talked about, really make them concrete, foundational for whoever builds event-driven architectures. I can also export async API out of there. And thank you, Scott. That's a quick deep dive into how these domains, as they are, these eventing domains are set up. And this is, from an architect's perspective, these are all the applications that are talking and the events that they're exchanging, right? And the events themselves, they have names, they have topics associated with them, they have schemas associated with them, so that people are consuming and publishing the right stuff at the right time.
Gotcha.
Right.
So this is on the design side. People pop into the designer, and then this is the place where they have the ability to basically document everything associated with what they plan to put in place for their event-driven architecture. And then what is this catalog option all about?
So the catalog option is, I think, something that event-driven architecture is needed for a very long time, and it's amazing that we have it here now. It's an architect's dream in terms of fostering reuse, right? With all these events floating around, one of the persistent challenges has been, how do I make sure that I have an index or a searchable place people can go and reference and see what's out there to reuse? And that's exactly what the catalog is. So once I have these events out there, these event applications, topics, whatnot, anyone who's interested can go to the catalog and look them up and search them and start reusing them rather than reinventing the wheel every time.
That's awesome. Now, I guess it have to ask the question because, we want to be servicing enterprise customers, and not all enterprise customers will be solely focused on advanced event mesh. So the question would be, can the catalog include events other than the ones you're using with the advanced event mesh?
Sure, because keep in mind that the catalog is tied to the designer, right? So as long as you design for those events,
Yeah.
that is to say, you can absolutely pull in things that may not be in the advanced event mesh now, and just to represent it. So it's there, absolutely, right?
Okay,
I
cool.
100%.
Awesome.
Stopping you from doing that.
Discovery. What's discovery about?
Discovery is about the fact that while we would like everyone to be using AEM all the time, the reality is, folks, enterprises have what I'd like to call a heterogeneous mix of eventing technologies, right? You have different brokers, if you will, different things that are doing eventing, which may have come before and maybe legacy.
Right.
So with the discovery engine, what we're able to do is actually listen and reach into these legacy brokers and reverse engineer and take the data flowing from those brokers and actually make events out of them and display those events in the catalog. So you get a holistic view of not just what AEM is doing, but also what those legacy brokers might also be doing right now. And
Gotcha. So if you have a bunch of people like me that just let's just skip the design and the cataloging up front, you get busy, you start publishing a bunch of events, and then after the fact maybe we could have a look now in the environment and pull those out and add them to the catalog. It kind of accommodates for people like me.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you that holistic view of what's going on at all times.
Cool. And then what is this thing here? Event API products. What would that be about?
So in a nutshell, just keeping an eye on the time there. Event API products are really for that B2B or domain to domain type scenario, right? Maybe I as an application or as a business have lots of internal events floating around. You don't really need to care about all those internal events. Maybe you just need to care about a curated set of them or a few of them composed into a larger API which you can consume. And that's really what that is. Those are the events, if you will, that I'm showing to the outside world,
right,
that I provide for consumption, right? Like when I'm selling cake, you don't really need to know that I use King Arthur flour and some other kind of icing. All you need to care about is the cake. And really, Event API products are the cake in that sense.
Gotcha. So it's just the way that I think of it is we don't want the events to be stuck within the four walls of the enterprise. We want to make sure that we have a mechanism to get them out to everyone, including external consumers. So this is the path towards that. Let's talk about the event streaming category quickly. We've got two components in here: cluster manager, mesh manager. What's this cluster manager about?
Cool. So event management is great. Design is awesome, but really we're here for the implementation, right? And cluster manager is the first step in that implementation, because that's what actually lets me deploy those AEM services close to or for my enterprise, whether that be close to the applications in a core or somewhere else.
Okay, cool. So
are the actual services themselves. Yeah.
Right. So what we're looking at here, which we're going to get into a lot in our next session, but just for people to realize quickly, like you'll see different logos for the different cloud providers. So just a key point that when you look at this slide, you think, oh, there's a broker there that's on GCP. There's another one that's AWS. There's one on Azure. So the idea is you put, again, just to come back to this mesh concept, which I said, I want you to remember one thing. This mesh concept is distributed, and we are hyperscaler agnostic. So you put these brokers wherever they need to be, including on-prem. They just magically connect. Like that's our job, to make it easy for them to connect. So this is the first part. You create on the runtime side, you establish the brokers that you need. And let's take a quick second, Ush, to describe this mesh manager. So just kind of give people 30 seconds on what they're seeing here.
Yep, absolutely. And so I've deployed those services, and the mesh manager is what really helps us realize that mesh idea we talked about earlier, which was I'm interconnecting these services as you see them are actually all interconnected right now. And so they're really able to share information and share events across, actually in this particular case, globally. Everyone's
Right.
sharing information with everybody else right now. And
Yeah.
so really powerful concept, right? Because I can co-locate my service close to my apps, and then the stuff that needs to traverse the ocean can do so.
Yeah,
Quickly.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I guess, what to me, an example that we'll show next time amongst a couple of other ones is just imagine a scenario where, you're on this Google Cloud, you have an application that's connected to this broker from SAP. It publishes maybe a sales order or a notification or a work order, and then instantly, to Usha's point, you would have access to it in Singapore if you wanted it. And that's the key thing, if you wanted it. So it's like, again, the radio analogy, there's things playing on the radio and you tune into the things that you want in real time, which is pretty awesome. Okay, let me just stop. Let me get out of full screen mode here if I can, which I have no idea how to do.
Yeah, why don't we drop back to the dashboard? Just click on the SAP.
Yeah, I'm going to go back there.
Yep.
Thanks, Scott. Great first session. Our schemas, there's one question here. Are schemas automatically populated for BTP events in the designer in AAM? I'll take that one. So at the moment, we don't have, what we've done on our side is we've imported, Jason, some of the events from S4 into the designer so people can see what they look like. In the future, we're hoping to have content out of the box, but at the moment you would have to design those or import them in. This is the idea. Let me just, if I can, last thing, I don't know if I'll be able to get it in time. Cancel. Hold on. So also I know, hold on. I'm just trying to bring up one here. I promised someone I would bring up a little, of course, when you're under pressure, time-wise, your fingers never work as you want them to.
That's right, my man. The magic of live demos, right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm almost there, people. Hold on. So one little thing for you. Now I got to go back and try to share the screen. My StreamYard. And almost there, folks. Hold on. Stop screen share. Present. So I'm going to stop the screen share for 1 second.
Yeah, ready.
And I'm going to reshare again. And hopefully you will now see. I'm not finding it. Where did it go? Right here. Do you see that screen, Ush?
I do.
Okay, so perfect. So we have a very comprehensive community program. So there's a little QR code here. If you want to scan it, it'll bring you to the right place, the right time, to be able to join the Solace developer community for all things event-driven architecture. You can scan the QR code, you can join up. We'll even send you some swag as being part of the community. So I just wanted to share that quickly so people will get notified about that. And then for our next session, the goal would be to have to go deeper into, I'm just going to stop the screen share, to go deeper into all things events, event mesh as it relates to SAP. So we want to give some examples. So publishing events over to the advanced event mesh and then seeing how you could interplay with those. And then of course, some demos around some of these concepts that we talked about today. So how do you create this topic? How do you create this queue? Things like that. And how do you create a mesh? So we'll get into that. And then we're going to do a session specifically on the publishing events from S4, maybe how you could interact with that in Integration Suite, maybe how you could interact with workflow. But that's it. I got to wrap it up. Respect the time of 4 minutes over. But thank you, Ush, for joining today.
It was fun.
Just thank you for sharing some of your knowledge with us. Thanks, everybody, for being online and being willing to spend some of your time with us today. And we will talk to you in 2 weeks, same bat time, same bat channel, 11 o'clock Eastern, 2 weeks from today. Everybody have an amazing day. Take care.
See you, everybody.
See ya. Bye-bye.